And retirement it's a weird myth. I like to think of it as quitting one of my 3 full-time jobs in order to focus on the other couple. So, but I have recently retired from BYU as a professor of computer science after the last 15 years doing that. A couple things kind of to start. One of the interesting things that happens, I've found in this generation, when people struggle with whatever, it can be pornography, that's probably the most pervasive, it's probably the most caustic, the most corrosive. But there's a lot of stuff going on, right, online. And what tends to happen for some unknown reason, or maybe it's known, is that they always look for the technology guy. That's really the natural thing where everybody looks, right? Because this is obviously a technology problem. We better get the technology guy. And what's really interesting is that, so yeah, I do have a doctorate in computer science. There's nothing in my graduate education that prepares me to be the father of 10 children in the digital generation, right? Nobody prepared me for what the proper tricks that you might engage to find a contraband iPod Touch, or to track down somebody who's doing, unsafe things online. There's really, so what I guess I'm really trying to say is, well, here's what I think about technology. Wait, hang on a second. I need audio. Hang on, where's our audio, Jeff? Wait, tech guy, do we have where's my tech guy? Did he leave the room? Horrible. I just need the phone. I just need the audio jack. It just occurred to me. Do you know where that is?
It's right here.
He knows where it is. Okay, let's try this again.
All right, let me go meet
Once more with feeling. Is it working? That's so horrible. Okay, but you got
their sound on.
Yeah, my sound.
Always and forever.
Because Kip is worth going back for. Hang on a second.
Yes, I love technology, but not as much as you see. But I still love technology, always and forever.
Okay, that, in a nutshell, is how I feel about that issue of whether this is fundamentally a technology. See, I think Kip doesn't have a technology problem. I think Kip has some other problems. That is from Napoleon Dynamite, if anybody missed the reference. One of the big eye-openers for me, teaching Education Week, which I did for a number of years on these sorts of topics, was some of the stories I would get from parents coming up. One in particular has really haunted me ever since. This woman came up and she said, "Is there a way to tell, for me to check what my son is doing on his cell phone? Is there a way to kind of remotely see what are the texts, what are that kind of stuff, right?" Because she had a technology problem. And I said, "Oh, it's not that hard. You just grab the phone. That's a really easy way to do it." And she says, "No, it's not. It's not my phone. It's his phone." And I said, "How old is he?" And she said, 14. I said, "Oh, it's your phone. Like, it is most definitely your phone." And she goes, "Well, he paid for it with his own money." I said, "If he bought cocaine with his own money, would you be okay with that?" "What are you worried about?" "I'm afraid that he might be sexting with his girlfriend." Okay, so you have a 14-year-old kid. He has his own phone. You have no supervisory access whatsoever. And you're afraid that he might be sexting with his steady girlfriend. Does this sound to anybody here like a technology problem? I hope not. I hope not, because it isn't. So sometimes when I've given presentations on this topic, I like to sometimes title this talk, or a variant of it, "The first thing you need to know about technology is that technology is not the first thing you need to know about." Okay? I sometimes also subtitle it, "Parenting is parenting even when there's a computer involved." Alternatively, when there's a cell phone involved or when there's something else involved. Somewhere in the process, this woman stopped being a parent, and I would get that over and over and over again. "My son is playing World of Warcraft 16 hours a day. How do I stop that from a technology perspective?" I think if you got a 16-year-old son spending 16 hours a day playing World of Warcraft, you already have a problem. That's not about technology. So what I want to talk about really is kind of this notion of of technology as kind of a bane or a blessing. And I view it really as a tool, right? That we're going to talk a little bit about things that have existed for a very long time. But here's an example of a tool. It's extremely handy. That's Paul Newman, by the way. But it's extremely handy to do certain things. For some unknown reason, people start doing things with it that you never would have anticipated, but do appear potentially useful at some level, but maybe dangerous, but you're not quite sure what to make of it. And then sometimes you just cross the line, right? That's Joan Crawford as an axe murderess. It's really just a tool. Let me give a couple of other maybe illustrations. Every tool has positive uses and negative uses, and so one of the things I want to do, if there's one effect I want to have, is to demystify, or to sort of take away the stigma associated with technology in and of itself. And I think it's beginning to be less of an issue. When I first started kind of dealing in the space 10 years ago, there was a lot more of the internet is scary, bits and bytes are scary, software is scary, computers are scary. What happens when my kids start using them is also scary, so I'll just pull the plug, and that will be what I'll do to protect myself, and then we'll be, we are a happy family, and so we're just going to take care of everything. But here's a couple of illustrations, I think, of the power of the technology that we're dealing with. This is 1991. A couple interesting things happened in the Soviet Union, one of which was that in 1991 there was a attempted military coup against the Gorbachev regime. Boris Yeltsin was the prime minister of the Soviet Union. And he was able to, in the White House in Moscow, completely surrounded by troops, he was actually able to walk out, step on a tank, give a speech, become essentially the supreme leader of everything, and then effect the dissolution of the Soviet Union using fax machines and copy machines. In 1991, this is pre-web. It's post-internet, but it's pre-web. In 1991, the tool of choice was a fax machine or a copy machine, with which he was able to rally entire, big mass demonstrations that were larger than the troops. The troops realized we got to kill 1 million people instead of just quelling a small uprising. Incredible what happened in world history. Without the copy machine or the fax machine, that didn't happen, okay? Now let's go fast forward about 20 years to the Arab Spring. Okay, a couple of things happened. Starting in 2009, there was a civil unrest in Moldova. Was the first place where people began to use technology to affect, kind of political means. Then it was protests in the Iranian elections. And then it was the Tunisian revolution, where the government, the dictator of Tunisia, was actually toppled, overthrown. And then famously, Hosni Mubarak, the dictator of Egypt, was overthrown. We literally had governments falling because of Twitter. And I love the picture in the upper left. Revolution tools, not the AK-47, not the machete. Twitter and Facebook. These were the tools. And then somebody actually published kind of a tongue-in-cheek article about how to hasten your fall if you're an Arab dictator. And the first one was try to shut the internet down and try to block Twitter. These were some of the earliest things you would do if you were an Arab dictator trying to protect your regime. So I think it's very interesting, and I think it's tremendous, that kind of power. Now, obviously, we're here to talk about, at this conference, we're talking about pornography, we're talking about addictive substances. I sometimes ask my students when I've taught this course on computers and technology, or ethics in computers and society, if you had to take the trade, an internet in which there existed pornography and other kinds of vile things, shut it all down, but you got to shut it down for everybody. So you take away the Arab Spring, you take away every positive aspect. If you're LDS, you take away indexing online. You take away everything. Would you take the deal? And that's a really hard one, because I think the corrosive influence of pornography is so tremendous, it's so deep, it's so powerful, that it's easy to say if we got rid of everything, it would be way, way better, right? But you'd have to lose a tremendous amount of positive things. So would you lose the axe if you could guarantee there were no axe murderers, but there would also never be chopped wood? Would you take the deal? You have to ponder that one yourself. I want to talk a little bit about some of those things. A few things are happening. World knowledge is exploding. This is just a graphic representation of all human knowledge in 1751. I think it's bigger now. This is just an interesting one. This is the knowledge doubling curve that was proposed by Buckminster Fuller. A couple of interesting observations, and I don't have a pointer, but you can the text is probably too small for most of you to read. Until 1900, human knowledge doubled approximately once a century. By 1945, it was doubling every 25 years. Currently, 2015, human knowledge doubles every 13 months. That's the estimate. And then recent predictions that the Internet of Things, which is a thing that some of you have heard about and most of you have not, will lead to the doubling of human knowledge every 12 hours. That's kind of staggering, but that's the world in which we live in, okay? That's the world in which we live. And what that leads us to is hot and cold running sewage, right? Because the doubling of knowledge means all knowledge, good and evil, right? I think that's the deal we actually took, or the deal that was made for us, was knowledge of good and evil, and on a massive scale, And this picture is really disturbing to me, because that's sewage on a massive scale. And that's kind of what we're dealing with, right? And so one of the things that I think behooves us as parents, and I'm mostly talking to parents, understanding that these issues that we're dealing with here are broad, they're pervasive, they affect all of us, they affect us as individuals, they affect our marriages. I want to focus a little bit more on parenting in this presentation. But one of the things that happens, some of you grew up in homes that had swimming pools. And what's the rule when you have a pool? Everybody swims, right? You've got to have swimming. Everybody in the house where there's a swimming pool has got to know how to swim, right? When I was a little kid in LA, my cousins had a pool. We did not. They were rich, we were poor. But I remember my mom was pretty hyper-paranoid that the children were going to die. She was very paranoid about that on a regular basis. No matter what was going to happen, we were going to die. And so the pool thing was not, anywhere in the cards. Interestingly, and maybe ironically, or maybe predictably, it was my little brother who almost drowned in the swimming pool, not any of the kids who actually lived in the house with the swimming pool. Why? He didn't swim. He didn't know how. Because my mom's philosophy was, we're just not going to have that. That was her favorite. Whatever it was, we're just not going to have that. Whatever it was, we were just not going to have that. Okay. Now, in contrast, what if you live in, say, Samoa? Okay. I don't think there's a whole lot of choice. And I have something I want to share for you. You may recognize this.
Hewlett, we have a visitor.
Remember the scene? This terrified me.
It is wrong to stow away.
Yes.
Now swim home and hurry up about it.
Okay.
My parents left me once at a gas station. We're just driving around the block, right?
How will he learn if I give in?
Cooley, what about sharks? Those leg cramps.
He is my son. He will be all right.
Yeah, if that happened today, the protective services would be there the next morning to take all of your children away. You threw a kid into the ocean a mile from shore and said, he's going to be fine. I think this is going to work out well. Yeah, we live in a hyper paranoid environment. I saw a meme on Facebook. It was an elderly lady sitting inside a semi-darkened room, looking out her blinds, and the caption basically said, 2 children are playing alone. I'm going to call the cops. Maybe some of you have seen this, right? We live in this kind of crazy environment. But I think that there's a natural tendency and a desire to want to pull the plug in order to keep ourselves safe. So the challenge that I want to just issue to you is I just don't think it's an option. I don't think it's a reasonable option. I think if we pull the plug at home, all we do is take ourselves as parents and grandparents out of the equation. Therefore, we walk away with a nicer, cooler sense of security because we don't have to deal with it. We put a bag on our head, and now we feel really comfy and safe, and we are safer. As grandparents, you're far safer to disconnect from your children online. You do not want to go where some of them are going. Okay, to me, the question is not whether they're going to get wet. The question is whether we're going to be there with them when it happens. And I think that's the only reasonable question at this part. And I recommend we do it with them. And I'll talk a little bit more in the afternoon. I've got some talking a little bit about social media and some of the post-Facebook things that are happening. But what's interesting about technology is I don't think technology causes any of this stuff. And let's be really clear. I started just kind of pondering what are some of the things that I think that are germane to this conference that have existed since the dawn of time. I think pornography has existed since the dawn of time. Immorality, promiscuity, infidelity, sexual addiction, every evil, child abuse, every single thing of any negative aspect that we're going to talk about in any session today has existed since the dawn of time in some form. We didn't invent it, and the technologists did not invent it, okay? What technology does is not create, it accelerates. So we've always had fire. We always had this ability, right? And then the internet or Instagram or something shows up, and fire is fire in a sense, but fire is not all fire. There are different things. And so among the things that get accelerated are the speed with which these things travel, the distribution, the penetration, the depth, the reach, the impact. There's so much, it's just accelerated. I asked my class one time this philosophical question. If you were, imagine that you had put together, in my case it would be a mission reunion Facebook group from 35 years ago, right? And let's say in your infinite foreknowledge you had access to some oracle who told you that there was a couple from the mission who had a mission crush back in the day. And because you created, as a direct causal, use the term causal loosely here, but somewhere after this, they would reconnect, rekindle the flame, and trash both of their marriages by infidelity. Would you still hold the family? Would you still hold the mission reunion? I think it's an interesting question. I was posing that to my teenagers, and my wife, who I see in the audience, came in and said, "Why are you talking to them about that?" It's because I want them to think, that's why. Well, would you take the deal? Would you take it if you knew that was going to happen? Now imagine that because you held the mission reunion, some folks that were currently struggling are going to make contact with folks, right? That we're going to help them, and they're going to be better. They're going to be spiritually better. They're going to be maritally better, right? Now you take the deal. And some of you are kind of like, well, that does kind of change things. I mean, on balance, it's back to even, so I guess we'll go with it. But if I can see numerically, right? So the fundamental challenge is, what did you really do there? All you did was accelerated access, and that's really all technology has done. So as we talk about, especially in the afternoon when we talk about social media, it's really a great deal about the breadth of the access, the intensity of the access, and then more and more younger and younger age, right? So while there was always all kinds of crap in the world, now all of a sudden the hot and cold running sewage can come right into your house. So it's a little bit different. Here's a couple examples. Let me give you just an example. These have been out there for a while. My exposure to these concepts come from Mark Castleman, from him personally, and from his book, The Drug of the New Millennium. Again, these aren't original necessarily to Mark, but that's where I got these. And I just like them. The idea here is let's take something that always existed, and now let's put it on steroids and see what happens to the effect, okay? Accessibility. Back in the day, pornography was not that accessible. You had to you had to be deliberate. You had to get in your car. I'm going to just go, the olden days in this case would be the 1970s, pre-cable TV, okay? Let's just go the 70s. You had to get in your car, go someplace, walk out, right, risk being seen, pay your money, get the thing, brown paper bag, get back in, slink back home, right? There was an accessibility barrier. There was also an affordability barrier. Pretty much anything that you wanted to get your hands on or get access to or see, you were going to have to pay for. You're going to have to buy a video, buy a magazine, pay your way into some club where this kind of stuff would be going on. If you wanted into the club, you're going to have to show some ID to get in. If you want to buy the stuff, walk into the adult bookstore, you're going to have to show some ID. The anonymity, and you're going to risk being seen, standing in line at a movie theater, standing in line, walking from a parking lot, your car is spotted, sitting in a parking lot near the adult bookstore. Anonymity, very, very much an inhibitor, right? And there, this is about the most aggressive thing I could find. The hawkers on the streets in Vegas trying to shove, paper at you, right? That's existed. But really not that aggressive. It's not like people, this is about all I could come up with really from the perspective of aggressiveness. It's not like you were sitting on your front porch and people drove up to your house and threw stuff in your front yard. That's not really what happened. But this is kind of the world that most of us grew up with. And if you look at that, that's a pretty significant inhibitor. Because even if you want to, even if you'd had a desire to access pornography, your opportunities are pretty limited. You got to make a concerted effort. You got to be pretty dang committed to get access to it. And yes, you could get access to it, but you had to be pretty committed. So what happens today? Accessibility? Boom. We got it. Affordability? Yeah. Cost of an iPod Touch? The world is at your fingertips. Anonymity? Yeah, strictly speaking, technically no, but really in effect, yes. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, we can track your IP address. We can do a bunch of stuff. We can figure out stuff. But really, for the most part, you're just in your bedroom by yourself somewhere. And aggressive. This is stuff that is just like a dump truck coming up to your house and just dropping a bunch of stuff in your front yard, whether you wanted it there or not. That's our world. That's our world. And so one of the things I want to kind of also maybe bring to bear here in this presentation is I think there's a natural knee-jerk reaction to say we've got this technology as a carrier for all this stuff. What we probably want to do is join a commune, preferably an Amish commune. I don't know if the Amish have commune. I grew up in Amish country in Iowa, and I don't remember the communes. But imagine that they did. This might be a great place. No electricity. Life's going to be really, really great. And I think that's a tendency. I'd like to just kind of flip that and say, maybe it's really more of a fight fire with fire. And I think that's really what you see going on today. You see technology being used to fight the fire, right? I want to hit a couple of things that kind of maybe brings this home just a little bit. This is just for fun. The logos of every organization represented by the speakers at this conference. Every one of them has a website. Some of them have produced materials. Some of them have produced or are producing apps for your phone. There's a tremendous, the story that that Elizabeth Smart, well, they both told stories about the use of the internet and tools to get access to tracking people down, right, online. So you've got forensic detectives who are very, very savvy technologists who use that understanding to get in and to understand who's doing what and to track this stuff down. Tremendous power that comes from that. So if somebody comes to me and says, I'm struggling with pornography and I'm struggling online, I'm going to think very quickly about online resources. I'm not going to think about pulling the plug and let's get away from electricity. I'm going to probably start thinking about there's some resources available online. Another thing that happens, and that's just websites, another thing that happens is software products being built. Some of these are the ones you know about, the filters, NetNanny and Content Watch, K9 Web Protection, OpenDNS. These are the big ones, Dan's Guardian. And then Covenant Eyes, some of you are familiar with that. I want to talk just a little bit about a couple categories of technologies and maybe just a little bit of insight about some of these relative to pros and cons that maybe you've thought about, but maybe there's some insight in here. One thing, when we talk about filters, I'm a big advocate. I think that our computers should have filters. Our own computers should have filters. Just you're not bumping into stuff that you didn't want to bump into, just for your own self. Even if you got the password, you have the override. I think it's still a good idea to have a filter. It just blocks a big chunk of it. For the family computer, for kids' computers, et cetera. I think it's just a great idea. But then we have to understand that filters are, I don't know the precise number, but it's around 90%, maybe a little better, but it's about 90% effective. Okay, when you consider the billions of web pages online and the trillions of images, video, still images of pornography and various kinds of garbage that's online, 10% getting through, that's a pretty good diet, a pretty steady diet of garbage. If you want to consume the garbage, the best filters that you can buy are really, at the end of the day, no true protection if anybody involved is committed to get access to it. If you or your kids want access, I guarantee you, that they can get access to that. That notwithstanding, I still think it's a good idea. I still just think, this is one of those things where, when you look at brain function, you look at what happens in the sexual response, an accidental exposure still starts the chemicals, still starts you down the funnel, even an accidental exposure. So if you can avoid a lot of that accidental stuff, you're going to be protecting yourself quite a bit from more deliberate stuff. And often it's the accidental stuff that starts the chemicals flowing. The brain starts to get a little stupider, right? Very, very quickly, limbic system gets all crazy, frontal lobes start to shut down, and then nobody's driving the bus. And then pretty soon, everybody involved here is now suddenly really, really stupid. So that can be triggered by accidental. So if you can, to whatever extent you can stop the accidental exposure, I think that's a positive. But we can't just say, as parents, I got a filter on my home computer, I put it in a public place, I've done my job. I don't think we can do that. I just don't think that's reasonable. The actual filtering itself is butting up against the limits of computer science. It's a hard problem to filter, especially images. It's really, really a hard computer science project. I think a problem. I think we're beginning to butt up against that. But the reporting and the usability and understanding what parents really, really do and really, really need. If there's anybody from these companies, and I know some of you already, I want to talk to you. The other thing that's going to happen is if it takes you too much effort to get what you need out of a tool, you will stop. Anyone ever done that? You have a tool, you have a filter, you got the reporting, you go to do the reporting, you don't get what you need out of the reporting, or they say, check the history. Okay, right, that's cool, and that is valuable sometimes. You check the history, and pretty soon you're like, blah, 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 and how many times you go back and keep doing that? You start to shut down. It's a natural human reaction when you're dealing with user interface. Even a small amount of overhead, your brain will just go, nope, not going to do it. You might have best interests, really be sincere. The brain's just like, too much overhead. One extra mouse click, I'm sorry, I'm not going there. That's what your brain does, for better or worse. I want to say one thing about accountability software like Covenant. The biggest problem that I see with those products as a general rule is false positives. In other words, you've got a trusted, the fundamental idea here, right, is that you have it's a little bit like somebody looking over your shoulder. Typically we're not, if everything we did on our laptops or on our phones was broadcast onto a big screen in the town center of the city where we live, we would probably be different in our searching and surfing and web habits. I'm guessing. It's an educated guess. I think we would probably function differently. Covenant and products like that attempt to do that. Essentially, I'm going to have a trusted pal. They're going to kind of see what I'm doing, and that's going to help me to feel like I've got some accountability. The challenge is all of these reporting mechanisms are trying to protect you from exposure to the same stuff. So therefore, they try to encapsulate and give you a report in a sense. So they might say, so-and-so has done, you might want to have a conversation because we're seeing the following things. But whenever there are false positives, meaning there was actually nothing inappropriate going on there, because it's still a hard problem from a computer science perspective, a few of those, and pretty soon your trusted pal gets a report from you, and it just goes, it's like, I know he's okay. I mean, I get these every week, right? Pretty soon it's the boy who cried wolf. There was a similar one that I saw, and again, I've used all these, I want to educate myself, and there was one time that a product, okay, it was Covenant. If anybody's here from Covenant, this was your product. There's a lot that I love about the product. But this one actually, in a report that came back to me, it said, this one website is kind of problematic. And this is the report back to the user of the computer. And it informed me that this particular video sharing site could not be tracked by that product. Ding, 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 ding. Yeah, you just won the video lottery. Why would you tell the user of the product on the one who supposedly needs the help, that you have failed in your ability and actually don't possess the ability to track the content of what they're watching when they hit a particular video site? You just told them where the safe harbor was. Okay, that's no good. Bad. Another one that you ought to just consider. This one has some interesting pros and cons, but keyloggers and screen grabbers. It's essentially cuts to the chase. It just sort of says, I'm just going to go install malware on my own computer. And I didn't actually list any of these. I've tried a bunch of these as well. I didn't list any because I'm not quite ready to advocate for one of them in particular. Besides, it's just dicey to put malware on your own computer. But what you're basically doing is essentially tracking all the keystrokes. Therefore, when your kids are on the home computer, you can actually see the passwords. You can get in. You see them logging on to a Facebook account that you didn't realize they actually had. It's another account that you can't actually see because they've blocked you on that account, right? There's some interesting struggles there. The other thing you can do is set those up that they'll actually just do a screen grab like once a minute. Just grab a screen, yoink, send it on an email. Every 1 minute, so you're getting emails piling up. You got to manage the emails. And the biggest problem is obvious, right? Anything that they've accessed that's inappropriate, whoever's reviewing that is going to see it if it happens. That's a problem. The upside is, you know how quickly you can go through 100 screen grabs and tell very, very quickly what's not a problem? You realize 99% of the time, it's really not a problem. It's only the incidental stumble, right? The ability of the human brain to do pattern recognition and that kind of visual processing is tremendous. And so you're just kind of going, oh, flip, Facebook, 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 Facebook. Good. 30 screen grabs, half an hour of surfing, 30 seconds invested, and you can also see who are they chatting with. You know, it is a really easy way to do it. There is the big risk. When they are into the garbage, then you have to deal with the garbage too. That's the biggest problem. Okay. What I'm going to do, I'm going to end, we're supposed to end at 12, I think, right? Does that sound right to everybody with their programs? What I'm going to do, I'm going to end with, I'm going to skip past some stuff because it's going to be in my thing this afternoon, and that'll give me a few minutes for questions. But I want to end with something. At the end of the day, it really does come down to accountability. I think that there's got to be conversations with our kids where they have an inherent internal desire to keep themselves clean of that kind of content. One of my, and I have 6 sons, and I've had these conversations with all of them. But I remember one son who actually said to me, who had struggled with online pornography, so he's really, he's in that isolated 99% of teenage boys who struggle in this generation with online pornography. But I remember at one point when he was past it, and he said to me, Dad, I feel these days like I don't have a desire. I feel like I'm addicted to the spirit. I like the feeling so much. I don't want to, of being clean of that and feeling spiritually connected, to the eternal. I love that, and I don't want to lose that. Well, that motivation is ultimately, I think, why all of us, at the end of the day, keep ourselves clean or try to, is that we like so much what it feels like to be free of that, we don't want to go down that road again. And so somewhere and I'll talk more about this afternoon, but somewhere in that process there's some parental engagement that becomes really, really critical and relative to our kids, but also individually. We have to realize that every single one of us, if I offered a cash reward for the first person in this room sitting right here without moving to access porn sitting in this hall, it would be about 10 seconds before I'd have to pay out. And if I offered it to the last person, it would be 90% of you could do that. 10% of you aren't here with any electronics at all. I don't understand that, but I respect it. Some of you how many of you have seen this? Really, this is wonderful. Okay, this is a poem called Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters. To me, it sort of embodies the agency aspect to all of this, why it's really not really strictly a technology problem, right? Our agency is transcendently powerful. So this is Portia Nelson. Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes me forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. But it isn't my fault. it still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. But my eyes are open. I know where I am. It's my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5. I walk down another street. That's it. All right, thank you very much for being here, for your attention. And I'm showing about 3-4 minutes. If anybody has a question, if you want to come up to the mic, and I'll do my best to dodge it or to evade being pinned down on anything.
Hello. Is there an online resource? You showed a bunch of filters up there. Is there an online resource that reviews a bunch of these filters so that instead of having to troubleshoot each one of them, you can make an informed choice as to which one might be best for you?
Yeah, the best one, this will be a little bit self-serving, but the Internet Safety Project, internetsafetyproject.org, it's self-serving because I founded it 8 years ago, and it's a nonprofit that I'm chairman of. But the goal of the Internet Safety Project, I didn't make a gratuitous pitch earlier, to my credit, but the goal of the Internet Safety Project was to sort of be a little bit more of a distillation, right? You go to the web and you type content filter reviews, you're going to get top 10 reviews and some others. The objectivity is questionable, the thoroughness is questionable. We have the largest wiki on internet safety issues on the Internet Safety Project, and there are articles there that talk about the broad spectrum of filters. And since it's a wiki, if you find stuff that you like better and want to change stuff, you can literally just change it on the wiki. And anybody can go on there and actually make the information better than when they found it. And that's frankly the best resource that I've got for that. Thanks for giving me that opportunity to make that gratuitous plug. It is a nonprofit.
My name is Vinny Barborka. I work with sex offenders and porn addicts with Kaizen Counseling. Great presentation. Have a suggestion. The picture from Mark Castleman, the aggression. What you had, the best you could come up with was something sort of outwardly aggressive and violent. To me, the aggressiveness is the incredible subtlety. A sex offender said to me last week, all I just gently did such and such. That wasn't coercion. And to me, that's the most powerful form of aggression and coercion is the subtlety of it.
Thank you.
Just an idea.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Any other questions? All right, I think we're right at 12 o'clock. Wait, we have one more. Actually, it's 11:59.
Has there been any attempt to combine two of these online filters to get better than a 90%, some 98%? Two on the same computer?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually done that, where there's like Dan's Guardian on the back end of something and then Content Watch on the computer. I don't know that it matters much. I mean, it probably does, because at the end of the day, right, if I get all these and you get all those, and there's, it's a little bit more coverage, but really at the end of the day, if you drop from 10% that's getting through to 8% or 5%, you're down from many billions to only a few billions. And it's still a problem. All right. Yes?
One last question. What's the biggest thing that gaps us from the 90% to the 100?
You mean in terms of coverage on content, like content filtering? I think it's just the fact that there's so much context. There's, for example, I might find something objectionable that you don't find objectionable, right? And so you've got to cross this entire human experience of where do I draw the line. There's the simple fact, like you could say, you take an anatomical term, right? And then how do you tell, this is legitimately studying for med school or my gross anatomy class in high school, and now I'm, where I shouldn't be. So contextually, it's really, really hard. And the other one is that it's changing so fast. There's new sites coming up. There are literally millions of sites, I don't know, per day, per week, coming online, new content constantly added. And so keeping, for the filters to keep up with that in this inevitable flood of new stuff is really, really hard. If we could today freeze the world and actually lock out and block every objectionable piece of content, tomorrow it would be 1 million pages out of date. Tomorrow. And it just goes on in real time. I think it's a really insightful question, and I think you have another one.
Well, you led right into my point, which is we say it's fight the new drug. It's really fight the new virus.
Fight the new what?
The virus.
Fight the new virus, yeah.
It's AIDS.
That's right. All right, thank you. Thanks for being here. I think we're out of time, and see some of you later on this afternoon. Enjoy the rest of the conference.